Nick, where do we even begin? I want to start at your childhood and what was your upbringing like? Where were you raised?
I was born to the two most volatile people that could have ever had a child, ever. I was the only one born to my mum and dad. They both had children prior to me. My mum had lost custody of her prior kids. My dad had nothing to do with his. So they definitely should not have been allowed to breed one more time. A lot of my childhood was spent in foster care, bouncing around back and forth. My mum has quite severe schizophrenia that is still not managed to this day, and my dad was a severe alcoholic. So just neither of them had the ability to parent. I think my mum just had me because she was lonely. She wanted a friend. So when I was not in foster care, I was with her like in clubhouses and you know what I mean? Like that I just grew up in that bikey, drug-fueled environment. So that's kind of set me up for failure.
And was that normal for you, or as a child, did you have an inkling that my other friends aren't doing this?
I didn't know anything different, and because I went to 14 different primary schools, so we moved a lot because of my mum getting in like DV relationships and all that kind of stuff. So I never really cemented down any friends because we could move somewhere and within 2 weeks I'd be gone again. So I never really made that comparison because that was just like my little bubble. That's all I knew. Yeah.
Was drinking and drug taking a big thing with your parents and the adults you grew up with?
So not my mum per se. She was just naturally insane. My dad, as I said, severe alcoholic. I was not around him very much when I was younger. And then again, obviously in clubhouses. I remember being in my primary school uniform. I must have been 10 or 11 and I was weighing up ounces of speed for the bikies that we were living with. And I was just like, yeah, cool. This is fine.
At 10 or 11, are you thinking, oh, this is a fun game I can do? You're not thinking this is an illegal substance.
No, it wasn't. Not the like, oh my God, this is what people go to jail for. Like I was 10. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm just like, oh, they've asked me to do this. I'll do this. And I was even at that age, so desperate for validation. Like I just wanted to appease everybody. And I'm like, oh, they think I'm like this cool little novelty kid that just weighs up their drugs for them. That was, yeah.
Nick, you're in clubhouses. What goes on behind closed doors? Feel free to not say something that you're not allowed to. I understand that there is quite a strong code of rule. What goes on that you can tell us? Like
it's honestly, some of them are like what you see in movies. You know, there's like bulletproof doors and there's a little like airtight room before you can go through the next bulletproof door and there's little dents from like people trying to shoot it and all that kind of stuff. Stripper poles everywhere. My experiences as I got a little bit older were probably... it's just a whole heap of young guys that they're trying to bring in and there's just the lack of respect for anybody. In the older generation, not so much, but obviously, I'm 30, so like 18, 19 years ago, that's when all these younger guys and all the prospects and all that are coming in and it became a really scary place to be. I didn't feel safe whatsoever. Whereas when I was that little bit younger and it's like all my dad's friends and stuff, it was a different dynamic. But yeah, I am very anti-bikey. Have been since then because I'm like I just haven't seen anything good come from it.
Is your mum with you in these places or are you just there on your own?
She would dump me a lot of the time. She would like find a new shiny boyfriend and she'd disappear. When I was just started grade 7, one of my brothers actually moved from Tasmania to Victoria. We were living in Victoria and took me to live with him. Because he was like, this is insane. Like, mum's nowhere to be seen and you're just living with bikies in, like, grade 6. I can't say that was any better than what I was in, but I can see the fault was there. But, yeah, mum wasn't around a lot of the time.
Nick, were you susceptible to trusting bad people because you didn't know who to trust
It's
at
that
age?
familiarity. Like, and that's what's gotten me into crappy situations as I got older. And, like, with my ex-husband and all that kind of jazz is... people act like absolute pieces of shit, but I'm like, that's all I know.
That's your level.
Like, I don't know, like, people are nice to me and I'm like, what do you want from me? Like, it's still, find it very hard still to make any sort of connection with people because I'm concerned of what their motives are.
You do speed at the age of 12 or when you were 11 about to turn...
Yeah, just before I turned 13, yeah.
So you were 12 years of age doing speed.
Yeah.
Tell me how that comes about. I know that you said that you were packing orders for them. Are you having a quick line there, or how does that? Tell me about that day, Nick.
Back then, it was all orange gel still, so it was like gack, as we would call it. And yeah, Mum had disappeared. I was going through it, I guess, and they smell it. Do you know what I mean? They can smell a weakness. And it got offered to me. And I was very mature at 12, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was not your normal 12-year-old who's coming home to do their homework and all that kind of jazz. I was drinking already. Like, I was smoking weed. So I was just like, why the fuck not? Like, let's give it a go. And then I didn't get a high. Do you know what I mean? I didn't, and then that's obviously where it stems back to like the late diagnosis with the other stuff. But then that just became my life, and then I just kept chasing. By the age of like, just before I turned 14, I started shooting up meth. And then I discovered downers, so heroin and stuff like that, and it all just snowballed. I loved everything. I was not one to turn down anything ever.
If it's going, you'll have it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Are you going to school at this point?
So I went for the first 2 years of high school, I went to a different school every term. So I went to 8 high schools in 2 years. Then we moved to the Gold Coast. My mum thought it'd be a good idea to just pack up and move to the GC. And within, I think, maybe 10 weeks, I got expelled because I was selling drugs at school. So I got expelled when I was 14. And that was it. No more school after that.
Selling drugs at school. I know this is...
Dick move.
I will just touch on this, but the curiosity is killing me. Are we doing it from the locker? Is it just like word spreads about? Because we're the same age, so we would have had internet. I think we would have had internet.
Yeah,
by then.
like I was on MSN and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
on MSN selling drugs.
Oh no, I would just do it at school. I would just take stuff to school.
Okay.
And people would kind of like find out because obviously I was the younger age, like I was in grade 9. So I was like selling to guys and girls and like year 12 and stuff. I would even make like space cake, like weed cake, and take it to school and just get everybody super high.
Little entrepreneur, can I just say, at such a young age. I was selling the chocolate Freddo frogs, and here you are selling.
Took it up a notch.
It wasn't long after this time, I think you said you were about 17, when you were drugged and gang raped, in your words. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
Yeah, I'm super open with all of that kind of stuff.
Did you know these men?
Yes.
What were they in relation to you?
So there was a group of them, obviously, and they were very well known in this area, like GC Tweed, because I grew up in Tweed mainly. And they were like, every girl wanted to fuck them. Like everybody, one of them, actually, no, I'm not going to say that. They were just, like the cool, older, they would have been maybe early to mid-20s at the time when I was 16, 17. And I started talking to one of them, like tuning, as we would call it. And one night, so the girl who was my best friend for years and years, she went to school with a couple of them who were like a little bit younger. And she's like, oh, they're harmless. Like, I've known him for years. He's got a girlfriend, blah, 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 blah. So we're at her house one night and they're like, oh, do you want to come for drinks? And I'm like, obviously. And they've come and picked up, there was 2 of them who came and picked up myself and my girlfriend, and we've gone back to their place, and she started doing shots of pre-workout in it, and I'm like, yuck, dude, like that's disgusting. And within like 20 minutes, she's chucking up peas and carrots all over the walls. Like, it was insane. And I'm like, I'm going to put her in the shower, and I'm going to put her to bed. She just pushed it too hard, too fast. She'd done like 8 shots in 20 minutes. I'm like, you're a liability. And I'd maybe gotten through half a can of Jim Beam, like not much. And I've showered her, put her to bed. This is in this massive house. And I come back and I finish my can of Jim Beam. I'm like, sweet, I'm all good. And within 20 minutes, I can't stand. And I wasn't taking any drugs, nothing at the time. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, everything starts to spin, and I'm sitting on this couch in the lounge room. It's still only the 2 of them at this point. And then I just remember crawling. I still remember what I was wearing and everything. I was wearing like a black pair of jeans and like a little pink crop top. And I remember crawling to the closest bedroom I could find and just lying on this bed and like trying to shield my eyes from the light. I don't know how long I was lying there for, but I remember the younger of the 2, the one that went to school with my friend, coming in, and I remember him undoing my pants and pulling my pants down and him yelling out, she's ready. That's all that I can remember at that point. I don't know whether I've then like blacked out to protect myself, like subconsciously, or whether I've just completely blacked the fuck out. And I don't know how many hours it was later I came to, but all of a sudden then there's 5 of them and me. And all in this same bedroom still. And then, I don't know, I must have passed out again, and I come to, and one of them's like fireman carrying me over his shoulders down a flight of stairs. I have no idea where the fuck I am. And he's with another one of them. So then it's not the original 2, it's like 2 new ones. And they get me down into this basement area and sit me on this couch. And I'm starting to obviously come to a little bit because it's obviously been so many hours at this point. And they're like, oh, we need to get her away from them because they're hogging her. And I just remember, I didn't even let them know that I was with it. I just sat on this couch, like pretended I was still, didn't open my eyes, nothing like that. And then it still continued for maybe like another 2 hours until like daylight. So, and then I've gone in, 3 of them have left, the original 2 stayed behind. And then I've gone in and woken up my friend and said, oh, we've got to go. Like, I would just call a taxi because this is before Ubers. And yeah, we get in this taxi and we go back to her place. And I didn't say anything to her because obviously I'm glad she was safe and like passed out and whatever. But yeah, that just festered for a few months. I wasn't doing drugs at the time. I ended up moving and they found where I lived and they'd like come and sit outside my house. So I ended up
it's never ending.
No. So then I ended up moving to Victoria because my sister was living in Victoria at the time. And as soon as I pretty much landed, I just fell in with the wrong crowd and straight back into I was going out every single night of the week in Melbourne City, just smoking a whole heap of meth, going back at 4 o'clock in the morning to work, taking as many pingers as I could just to try and like block that out.
That seems, first of all, that's absolutely, there are no words. That's horrific and disgusting and very orchestrated. That seems very orchestrated.
They 110% had that all. I mean, they probably didn't plan on my friend chucking everywhere and passing out. She was probably going to be of some use to them as well. But, yeah.
How, obviously, the drugs are used for an escapism. And I know I'm jumping the gun, but Nick, how do you even begin to heal from something like that? We can talk, we're going to go back to the drugs and drink, but like I'm having goosebumps right now because that is just such a horrific act. How do you heal?
I had already been through some similar, not as severe, like not 5 men at one time feeling like, you know, you're just a blow-up doll essentially. But I was molested by a family member from the age of 4 and that continued on and off through up until I was 10, every time I'd like get out of foster care. I'd already experienced so much of that again, I think I'd just become, I'm like, oh, another one. But obviously that was the most brutal. I say brutal in the sense of like how it was carried out was brutal. Yes. Whereas like being molested as a child is also extremely brutal, but I was like groomed at that point. Do you know what I mean? This just came out of nowhere. I didn't see this coming. It was maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago, it all of a sudden like came back to me out of nowhere, this situation. And I had to go and seek some help for like a month because I was like, I couldn't move past it. Like as soon as I'd wake up in the morning, that was the first thing on my mind until I went to sleep. And I was just mental breakdown every couple of hours. Just this anger because I would then, again, first time in maybe 10 years that I've even looked them up and they're all married with kids. And I'm like, you don't deserve that.
And I think as well, even your friend vouching for them as this good guy. I'm so sick of hearing that about that, you know, like he's a good guy or, oh, he's got a girlfriend. Like that excuses anything. We will move on. We have to move on because I'm seething for you. The drinking and drug taking are ramped up in Melbourne. Do you meet your partner, your ex-partner then? Or?
No, so I got very deep in the depths of things in Melbourne very quickly, like the underground, you know, whatever you want to call it. And within like 2 weeks of me being there, I'm selling like thousands of pills for this guy that I've known for like 2 days and hanging out in these inner city apartments and you walk in and there's like a whole middle room and it's just kilos and kilos and kilos of drugs. And I'm like, oh, sweet, this is like just like old days kind of thing. This is fine. But that's when there was a bit of that GHB epidemic going on and I had no idea what that was because up here that was not a thing. People called it juice in Melbourne, whereas up here I was used to calling steroids juice. So I was like, the fuck's everybody taking steroids for? What am I missing? That was happening and then I ended up getting hooked on that and that just spiraled super, super quickly because I will just push things to the extreme. But yeah, I just ended up getting so tangled up in it that I was like, I'm going to end up dead either fucking somebody over or I'm just going to push it too hard. So I moved back to the Gold Coast and I was still going out partying. The drugs never stopped. They changed because back then 12 years ago, ice wasn't as big as it is here now. So I'd come back from Melbourne thinking, well, it's the lesser of two evils. I'm not smoking ice anymore, so it's fine. But still out every night, popping pills and taking gack and all that kind of stuff. And that's
are you selling at the same time?
When I moved back to the Gold Coast, I wasn't. Okay. But in Melbourne, I was. I would walk around, those metal Eclipse mint containers? Yeah. I would walk around with 3 of them, just filled with pingers.
Just filled.
Yeah. Just like open them up in the smokers area and see if anybody wants to buy some pills.
Just because I'm thinking the logistics of it all, like, gacked out of your brain, it would be hard to sell at the same time.
In saying that, though, my tolerance and my ability to function so well on it is a blessing and a curse. Do you know what I mean? That's why I was an addict for so long, because I'm like, I can go to work and I don't steal off my grandma and I don't, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm like, so I'm fine. Like, there's no issue with my addiction. I'm very lucky and grateful that I never did slip down into that rabbit hole.
Isn't it funny? Like, we make up all of these archaic rules for ourselves and we're like, oh, if I haven't done that, that means I don't have a problem.
100%. Like, 100%. I was like, I've never stolen off anybody, so it's fine.
Yeah, you're not. Oh. When do you meet your ex-partner?
Just before I turned 18.
17 up on the GC?
Yes, he was a bouncer at a pub across the road from a club that I would frequent. And knight in shining armour. He was like, I'm not going to be with you if you're on drugs. He didn't drink or do drugs. And I'm like, oh my God, he just wants like the best for me in the whole world. And I got cold turkey sober, which I'd done plenty of times before. So I was like, this will be fine. But I guess being that bit older with all that more trauma that we just discussed before, I was not fine. Tried to kill myself like 3 times while I was getting sober because I was like, I don't want to live if I'm not cooked. Pushed through that. And the first 6 months, like honeymoon period, him being supportive, blah, blah, blah. And then we moved in together and he just, like most evil person I've ever met in my life. And I've been around some terrible people. Like I've picked up a guy before who was getting out of jail for murder for 19 years. And I'm like, it's nothing. Mm-hmm. But my ex-husband actually scares the shit out of me. Like terrified of that man.
I'm assuming there was a lot of love bombing in those first 6 months in order 100%. For you to get sober for him. And yeah.
Like I was finally the apple of somebody's eye who wasn't an addict, who wasn't a bikie, who wasn't, do you know what I mean? Like he had a good family on the outside. And I'm like, this is it. Like this is just, and then obviously the violence and stuff started. He beat the fuck out of his dad. And like
out of his dad?
Out of his dad.
In front of you?
Yeah, in front of me. I had to drive him to the hospital because he ended up with like 2 knuckles all the way back here. And I was just like, fight or flight. Like I'm still stuck in this whatever. And then he ended up proposing. And I had just been in hospital and I come out and he disappears for like 2 days and rocks up with an engagement ring.
And was that the pattern that he would do? Something bad would happen, he'd run off and, you guys would make up. Is that the sort of...
100%. It was so bad. But then I just became so obsessed with, I'm like, I can't leave because that's embarrassing. I was embarrassed to leave. I'm like, I finally look like I've got my shit together. I was an accountant working for like a construction company. We had a house, got a dog. Do you know what I mean? Like it was a white picket fence, what society wants you to do. But behind closed doors, I wasn't allowed to have any friends. I wasn't allowed to speak to my family. I had no connection with my family whatsoever. Even when my dad died, we were driving when I found out that my dad had died. And he's like, if you're going to cry, you can get out and walk.
Okay. So that's the level we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when was that? My dad died in 2016. We got married 6 months later because I freaked out after my dad died. I didn't know what the fuck to do with my life. So I was like, I'm just going to plan the wedding. We'd been engaged for like 2.5 years. Quickly planned a wedding, got married. I had to walk myself down the aisle because I didn't have anybody, nobody wanted anything to do with me. And I remember being at the chapel doors and they'd obviously closed them again. And I've said to the wedding planner dude, and I'm like, you're going to have to kick me down the aisle. He's like, what the fuck? I'm like, I don't want to go.
You intuitively,
I knew. So I knew the whole time, but I was like, it's better the devil, Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like I was still in that mind frame, that at least I know what I'm dealing with. But then after we got married, it just got so much worse.
Being sober and trying to improve your life would have been more of foreign territory than the drugs and the domestic violence. Like that was what you were used
100%,
to. So you clung on to that more than...
Yep.
Can we talk about the domestic violence? I want to go through your thought pattern of when you thought you were going to leave him.
So it got to the point where I was like, I was sober, obviously stone cold sober for the whole time we were together. I did start to drink towards the end. Like when I knew that it was going to end, I'd be drinking a lot of wine, taking Valium, like the housewife diet, as I like to call it. And I was just suicidal as fuck. I woke up every single day. I'm like, I want to die. Like I would rather die than be anywhere near this man. And it got to the point in June 2018 where I was like, I'm going to drive myself to the hospital because I think I'm actually going to kill myself. Like it's going to happen. Drove myself there, and obviously my long, complex history, they're like, oh, you know, we don't really know what to do or how to help you, blah, blah, blah. So I drove home, and he got home from work, and I just remember sitting on the couch, and he was like behind the island bench in the kitchen, and I'm like, I drove myself to the hospital today because I want to kill myself. And he looked me dead in the eyes, and he's like, well, what's stopping you? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I need to get the fuck out. Like, he hates me. Like, he fucking hates me. If I don't kill myself, he's going to kill me. Like, he used to, the dog that he got me when my dad died, he would lock me outside and just beat the fuck out of the dog. Like,
oh, my God.
Just twisted. He's a twisted human being. The shit that I used to see him do to people outside of me, he just got so much joy from hurting others because he was like a big dude, whatever. And that was sober. Like, seeing him, the couple of times I ever saw him on anything, terrifying. I had to go, like, into hiding for a few days because I'm like, he's going to kill me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people can think that, like, oh, that's a stretch. But, yeah, if he can do that sort of stuff to other people, he would murder you. I actually think he might have killed you.
After we split up, the violence actually got a lot worse. He tore my rotator cuff in my left shoulder. He broke my pelvis. That was after I left him. He broke my pelvis 2 years after I left him because I was trying to get him to sign divorce papers.
You wrote to me that the day you left him physically, you had nothing but the clothes on your back.
Nothing.
What happens from then? That I want to go back to that day. Do you seek family? Do you seek a woman's shelter? Do you go to the hospital?
I sat in my car. So we lived northern Gold Coast, close to Wet and Wild. I sat in my car outside Wet and Wild for 6 hours because I was like, where the fuck do I go? I don't have family. Well, I do, but nobody that I'm close with.
He's isolated you.
100%. I had nothing. I'm like, the one friend that I was talking about before who was involved in that situation back when we were teenagers, I'd seen her twice in maybe like 5 years. And I'm like, fuck, I don't even know where she lives. Like, I don't know. So I ended up, having to go through the women's refuge sort of situation. And then the place I was working at, I'd made a friend, and her family actually stepped in and helped me out for like a month or so. And then I found a place to live and stuff like that. But I just had to bounce around flat out because he would find where I would live. And
life was in danger.
Yeah. For like I left him on the 30th of June 2018. Again, with literally nothing. He went to walk the dog, and because he'd flipped out, I obviously said to him that day before, I'm going to kill myself. Like, that's how bad things are. And it must have triggered something in him, and I had to lock the dog and I in the laundry all night because he just trashed the house, like fucked up everything. And he went to walk the dog the next morning acting like nothing had happened, and I literally got in my car and drove off. I blocked him and his entire family on social media, blocked all their numbers, and that was it. We've been broken up for nearly 7 years. I've still never even heard a word from any of his family. Nothing.
Well, I guess if he's beating up his dad.
Yeah, they all knew what he was like. Yeah, he was the bad egg. He was the eldest of 4 boys, and they were all pretty fucked up.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So you've been out of the abusive relationship for a few months now, and you go back to doing what you know works.
It took me 2 days.
2 days to sell drugs?
No, 2 days to get back on them. Oh, and then, 2 days to get back on them. I was so, like, I've been sober for this long.
Yeah.
I'm
and
fine.
Look how that turned out.
But I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need them. I've just proven to myself I don't need to be high. I'm fine. Yeah, within 48 hours, I was back on drugs. And then within maybe 6 weeks, I was selling them again.
Selling them for just the cash? You needed cash fast?
I was working still. I had a great job as an accountant.
I mean, good. Thank goodness you had an outlet.
It didn't last long because then I started selling drugs to my boss.
Yeah, that would do it.
Not funny, but like clientele appears where it appears. Do you know what I mean? And then we had a Christmas party and I ruined it.
Tell me more. You have to tell me more.
Oh, because it was a big company, and so big Christmas party, my first ever big Christmas party, and on the table it's just free flow alcohol, whatever the fuck, and I'm just sitting there smashing back 4Xs and bottles of red wine. Like, I don't know who the fuck I thought I was, and then nobody's on the dance floor, and I'm requesting to play Lil Jon, And I've like whipped my tits out. Like
we would have been best friends.
Oh my God, it was horrendous. I was like, I can't go back into work the next day. And then I actually gave my boss something that night, and he goes into work like a week later, and he's like, oh, my car got stolen that night. I'm like, no, it didn't. I was like, you drove. He's like, no, I didn't. I was like, I watched you drive away. I told you not to drive. And he's had to call these detectives and be like, it turns out my car wasn't stolen. So I got all the blame for that, which is fair enough.
Yeah, okay.
But
okay, so you leave you
Yep.
voluntarily leave your
Yep.
job. You're selling drugs.
Mm-hmm.
When do we enter the sex industry?
Oof. So that was end of 2018. So that's only like a 6-month window after leaving my ex-husband. I would say I got into the sex industry maybe like September 2019.
Okay.
But I got in there with the sugar daddy stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, but I had said, I'm like, this is glorified escorting. I'm not an idiot. Like, I had nobody in the sex industry, never known anybody that's been in it. I'm like, I'm just going to wing it and just hope for the best. And yeah, so got in with the sugar daddy stuff, lasted like 2 weeks. I'm like, they need too much of my time and attention. I can't hack this.
Yeah, can we go through it? So you sign up on a website and then set up a profile.
Yep.
And then what happens?
It's like they'll see you because they have to pay to be on there, whereas you don't have to pay. They will see you. And if obviously they like what they see, they will contact you. But the problem is a lot of the time they're just looking for a glorified girlfriend for $500 a week. I'm like, no. Like, I want to be taken out for nice dinners. I did get a little bit of that. Like, it would literally just be dinner. They just want company. But a lot of them, the richer they are, the less giving they are with their money. So after a few weeks, I was like, this is too hard.
I know they're just blowing up your phone 24/7.
Yeah,
like,
because
the
they're old
girlfriend
lonely men.
experience.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm like, I could get paid so much per hour to go and do this and never have to speak to them again. So that was what I did. And it was great because this was pre-COVID. I was having a great time.
Yeah.
Like, I had the best clients in the world. The industry wasn't as full on as it is now, as in it wasn't as flooded because there's so many girls obviously lost their jobs during COVID. Yeah, I had one client every Friday night. He'd book me for 4 hours. We never slept together. He would pay $600 an hour plus give me another $1,000 to go get an 8-ball. And I would go pick up this 8-ball before I go to his house on a Friday. And we would just sit there and talk and snort the 8-ball for 4 hours. And then I'd go home with like $2,500 in my pocket.
That, I can imagine, and pun intended, would be so addictive.
Oh, insane.
Like, how do you leave? Like, no, let's not get to that yet because I've got so many questions. But so you're making that type of money on one night. Is that an average? What's the average wage for you?
When I first started, my hourly rate was around $4.50 because I was undercutting, like, you know, self-esteem, all that kind of stuff. And it's all new and rah. But then within a couple of months, I put it up to $600 an hour. But I was just super, super lucky because speaking to these men, I could kind of weed out. You could smell who had bad intentions and who didn't. So 90% of the time, it was just lonely dudes that just wanted some company. And I can talk the hind legs off a donkey. So I would get booked for a couple of hours and 95% of that booking was just me yapping about life, about whatever. And then maybe 80, maybe 70% of them, you'd end up sleeping with them and it'd last like 5 minutes.
Yeah, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your first ever booking.
Oh my God. Okay.
Walk me through it. I'm excited.
A guy was up from Sydney and booked me, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you don't let them know it's your first time. So I'm freaking the fuck out. And I was sober at this point as well because I would go up and down with my sobriety. And he sends me his hotel and his room number. I'm like, cool. I go in there and I'm like shaking. Like, I'm like, this is, am I going to die? Like, what's going to happen here? And this lady answers the door in a robe, like with a face mask on. And I'm like, and I'm not dressed nicely. I got my tits out, like everything's happening. And she's like, who the fuck are you? And I'm like, Graham? She's like, there's no Graham here. I was like, I'm so sorry. He sent me to the wrong hotel.
Oh my God.
So I've called him and I'm like, and he's like, oh my God. He's like, I'm at the hotel next door.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. But
that was my first experience.
I was going to say, what are the chances of that happening your first day,
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. He ended up being great, fell in love like they all do, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
But once I kind of ripped that Band-Aid off, it was super addictive. But I was also the type of girl that could never see more than 2 or 3 clients a week because I'm like, it's just too, at this point anyway, it's just too draining.
Yeah.
Like, they do drain the life out of you because they're paying for what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you got to give them your all or they're going to crack the shits.
Yeah, you can't just be having an off day
No,
like we all do.
You've got to put on this big facade.
Talk me through your drinking and drug taking whilst you're working as an escort.
Initially, I was like, if you can't do it sober, don't do it at all. That was my thing. So I was pretty good for the first. Like, you would drink with clients because it makes it easier. But drug taking wise, I wouldn't really do anything because the stuff that I was doing was too full on for me to be able to sit there for a couple of hours with a man that I don't know and try and whatever. Like, I didn't want to wig out. You know, that would be terrible. Until I got a client maybe a year after what we're just talking about. Yeah, probably, no, not even a year, a bit less than a year. Get this client, and I was going through it. At that point in time, I'd been on a bender for like 3 months. Like, I was in the trenches, and he sent for everything I need, like security screening, all that kind of jazz. And I get to this hotel in Broadbeach, and I walk in. It's like a 6-seater dining table just covered with every single fucking drug you could imagine. And I'm like, fuck. Like, I'm trying to not keep this going. And I hadn't touched ice in maybe 18 months. So it was just party drugs and stuff like that. And he kept trying to offer me the pipe. And I'm like, no, I'm okay. Until he gave me some GHB. And then as soon as that kicked in, everything felt amazing. So I was like, yeah, I might as well just have a twirl. And then that just sent me into a spiral of using ice for like 6 months. But I found out while I was there, I didn't even end up sleeping with him either. He tells me, he's like, oh, I just got out of jail yesterday. I was like, okay, cool, whatever. And he's like, yeah, I was in there for 18 years for like kidnapping, holding someone against their will, grievous bodily harm.
He's telling you this on his own accord.
And I'm sitting there, I'm still stone cold sober at this point, and I'm like,
you're looking at the exits
I'm going to fucking die. Like, he's come out and he's ready to go straight back in. Like, he's going to kill me. But thankfully he ran out of meth to sell people. So he had to go and pick up more meth. And he's like, oh, you can just leave. I got like $2,000 for just getting high.
Okay. Oh my gosh, Nick. Can we talk about your overdose?
Mm-hmm.
Where in the timeline are we now? So how old are you?
That one now, so I started 2019, so that was 2020. So I would have been just about to turn 26, so 25 with that story. And then as it progressed, I started managing girls instead of me working because I started to hate men so much that if I was in a booking and they had their back turned, I'd start envisioning like how I'd kill them. Okay. Like, I'd be biting my tongue so hard it would bleed because I was still going through the divorce. That was getting worse. I was just, at a point where I was like, I can't be near these men, but I can manage girls and be in a kind of safer situation for them than what I had. I did so I was independent for a long time, and then I went to an agency in Sydney, very traumatic. And then I went to a couple brothels in Western Sydney, like Fairfield and stuff. So that was a lot. But when I started managing, my drug taking got worse. So I was managing girls at a place just over the border. And I would be getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, popping like 4 MD caps, shotting Grey Goose, just to get me going for the day, to talk to men all day, to book in the girls. And then, the overdose, fast forward maybe, so end of August 2021.
Okay.
Yeah. Big overdose.
What was the difference? Because obviously, you knew how to take drugs and you knew your limits and... What happened this day? Talk me through it.
I had gotten in with probably the worst group of people that I had ever come across. I was off the ice again for a while, and I used to get this itch every 18 months. So I was like, I want to get back on the pipe. And I'd go on a pipe bender for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then I would wipe my hands of whoever had seen that. And I was managing this place over the border, and I was like, fuck, I don't know anybody who does ice, because none of my immediate friends, I wouldn't keep that in my circle because you are your circle kind of thing. And I'm like, who the fuck? And there'd been this guy that had been harassing me. The fuck, whatever, a friend of a friend, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, him. He's all over it. End up in an Airbnb in Surfers for like 3 weeks, just off my face, getting guns held to my head, like, just insanity. And there was a lot of GHB at this point. I hadn't touched it in a couple of years. And one night I was trying to leave, and he's like, I'm not letting you leave unless you plunge this whole syringe of Frank. We call it Frank up here. And I'm like, why the fuck would I plunge a whole syringe? Like, I'm going to be dead. He's like, you're not leaving the door unless you plunge the whole syringe. I was like, fine, give it here then. So I've plunged this whole 10 ml syringe of Frank, gone about my business, and I'm like, why is it not kicking in? I'm like, what the fuck am I missing? Obviously high as fuck on meth and everything else at the time. And then maybe like 18 hours later, my whole body just completely shut down.
Does it take 18 hours to...
Not usually.
Okay.
But for some fucked up reason, I don't know if it's because I was so high on everything else, and that was what I was still smoking. I was in the car smoking ice. Like, I was just go, go, go. And then it wasn't until I tried to get some sleep. And I remember lying down in bed, and obviously I'm not sleeping. It's like 2 o'clock the next day. And then I had a girlfriend who was staying with me who was sober. And she wakes up at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I'm pacing naked in the lounge room, just losing my shit. And I've never been like that. And she's like, apparently was trying to calm me down. I don't remember any of this. She's like, you were just pouring sweat, like your whole body. She's like, and then you're like, I just need to lie down. So I've gone and lied on the bathroom tiles and just started vomiting blood, having a seizure. Obviously, I don't remember any of this. And she called the guy who gave me the big old plunge. And she's, because he was staying like 3 stories above us. And she's like, Nicole's dying on the floor. Like, what the fuck do I do? He's like, get all of your things and get out of the apartment. Just leave her there.
That was his advice?
Yeah.
Was he known to police?
He's been in and out of jail.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a good person. He, that in that group itself, it ended up, there was a guy that had HIV that was spreading it to girls, like bad, fucked up individuals. Like, we've all been through some shit in our lives, but just the type of people that then want to ruin everybody else's life around them. So yeah, he was like, get all your shit, wipe down anything that's had your fingerprints on it, and just leave it there.
Have you spoken to that friend again?
Her?
That would have been...
Her and I became like this. So later, I think a day later, I messaged her. I was like, I am so fucking sorry. Like, I don't want to fuck up your life. I don't want to bring bad shit. She was obviously already involved in that. She knew him, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, the guilt that I had for her having to witness me fucking dead on the floor, essentially. Holy shit.
The ultimate, like... choosing between leaving your friend who's probably going to die to maybe getting caught up in the police, that's a really hard position.
We'd only
to
known
be
each
in.
other for maybe like 6 weeks. I'd met her because I was managing her. That's how we met.
Right.
And she was a very good girl. Like, I always told her, I was like, please don't go any further in the industry than what you are, because I just don't want to see it ruin you.
And that was the catalyst for you getting sober.
Yeah.
Why this time?
Good question. It's not like it was the first time I'd overdosed. I think it was just a big part of it, I think, was the guilt with her. I felt so bad that, again, she'd had to experience that, but then that made me sit back and question how I'd treated everybody for the last 12 months. And I'm like, okay, some of it was warranted. I was like, but my morals, even though I never stole off my grandma, but my morals just went out the window. Like, I just didn't give a fuck about anything other than getting high. I was still a nice person, but if I had to pick between our friendship and drugs, it was going to be drugs.
Yeah.
And I would realise that it just festered. I used to have such good control over it, and it had just festered into this, like, I can't exist unless I'm high. I'm like, you need to grow the fuck up. So I moved up to Brisbane and just cold turkey ripped the Band-Aid off. And then I became super physically unwell and had to go through radiation and stuff like that. And I was like, I just have it still in my mind now, but I was like, if I don't get sober now, I'm never going to be sober.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of people I interview say the same thing. They knew in their heart of hearts that they would either be dead or they had to do it right then and there.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick, what a life. And you're still so young. You're 30?
Feel it. Yeah, I do not feel it.
Talk to me about sobriety, and I want to know the most interesting thing you've learned about yourself, or what healing looks like to you now.
I am still, it's been 3.5 years almost, and I'm still on struggle street with it. Like, I have times where I'm like, I had it so much easier when I was a crackhead because I didn't have to give a fuck about anything at all.
Yeah.
The money, obviously, is such a big one. Like, trying to go from making like, $15,000 to $20,000 a week doing the bare minimum to then being like, okay, I have to be like a functioning member of society again. That's rough. Trying to, just when I think that I've worked through everything, something else will pop up. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake.
Right.
Like, how is this still a thing? Like, I've been going to therapy on and off since I was like 13 years old. I'm like, how is this still an issue that I have to face and deal with emotionally every fucking day? Yeah, it's been interesting. When I first got sober, I got stuck in a little bit of a spiritual psychosis.
Yeah. I can see that happening.
I was like, everything's got to have a meaning.
Yeah.
Fucking, you know, angel number, obviously, angel numbers,
Yeah.
all that. You know what I mean? I was infatuated. Human design, studying my whole birth chart to find out why I was like this. Like I had to
feel
know.
like I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh no, that's all the things I like to do.
But it got me through it.
Yeah.
Like I collected thousands of dollars worth of crystals and fucking did new moon and full moon rituals every month.
Yeah.
And Reiki and kinesiology and all of that. But that got me through that first couple of years.
I also think there's a beauty to it, right? Because it's like, I feel like now, and you're probably the same, I had to go through that to be, I feel like that was my life path. And maybe that's a defense mechanism. Maybe that's just us as spiritual psychosis. But I truly feel like everything that's happened to me, it had to happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, maybe like that is us trying to protect ourselves, trying to protect our little hearts. Do you change your friendship group completely? Do you overhaul your life?
I already, as I said, didn't really have moving around so much. I did have one close-knit friendship group when I left my ex-husband. But then I thought it was close-knit. But then once I got sober, I realised that I was not fun to them anymore. I was just providing the fun. I pretty much cut off everybody. I was like, anybody that didn't want to hang out with me if I wasn't fucking on something, they didn't want to know me. So now I've got maybe like 2.5 friends. And that's something that I'm starting to really notice more since turning 30. I'm like, holy fuck, I'm a little bit lonely because I don't have that support network. Like the 2.5 friends I do have, when I say half, it's that friend I was talking about before.
Oh, yeah.
When he pops up, when he feels like chatting to me. But the other 2 I've known for a really long time who've seen me at my absolute lowest and have still stuck around.
Yeah.
No judgment, no whatever. But I don't have that girlfriend tight-knit group, which I really struggle with now that I'm old.
The sex industry, are you still in it to this day? When did that wrap up?
I love the sex industry in the sense of I always know that I will be tied into it, whether I don't think I'll ever actively work in the sex industry myself ever again, but more in the sense of managing other girls, helping other girls, making sure other girls are not managed the way that I was managed a few times, because 95% of the sex industry is Lebanese men that do not give a fuck about girls' feelings. I remember one of the brothels that I was like managing in Western Sydney, a girl had been torn open by a client. Like brutal stuff. Had to go to hospital. It was on a day shift. Like it's like 11 o'clock on a fucking Wednesday morning. I was like, she's got to go to hospital. She needs stitches. And he's like, yeah, but you've got to fine her $500 for leaving her shift early. Like there's just and the sex trafficking, insane. Like
I've heard that it's bigger than anyone thinks.
Like I obviously only saw a very small snippet, but that's why I had to stop working in Sydney. I was like, this is going to drive me to the brink of like insanity. Like I got stuck in a psychosis a couple of times whilst I was using, and I was so scared of being stuck in one permanently and just never, the shit that goes on. But the problem is like you can never change the sex industry. Obviously it's hundreds of years old. It's worldwide. Yeah. But I just have this intense fear of any girl that I know, even if I see a girl on TikTok and she's just gotten into it and I'm like, babe.
I want to come back to that. I do want to come back to that because that's so interesting that you touched on that because I do feel like it's quite glamorized now. I want to come back to that, but what you wrote to me I found so fascinating. We will start wrapping up soon. You said you loved the sex industry because in your eyes you were taking the power back from all of those men who had done you wrong. Could you elaborate on that?
I guess obviously as we've chatted about, I have not had really any good experiences with men throughout my entire life. Like I've never known a safe man romantically, whatever. So getting into that industry subconsciously, I was kind of like, I got on Tinder actually when I first left my marriage and I was like, I'm fucking these men for free. They tell me everything I want to hear. They love bomb the fuck out of me for like the first 72 hours and then they ghost me. I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? I was like, I might as well just get paid for less emotional output. Yeah, even though they are paying for my habit, they're giving me the money, whatever, I still was like, I call the shots. Like if I don't want to fuck you, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was still like I had that, I almost felt like an alpha.
Yeah.
I was like, because I would just be like, well, it's my way or the highway kind of thing, which definitely helped heal some things. Yeah. But now I still, like if I just am always itching to fight a fully grown man. It's so bad. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there.
No, I think that's very, Nick, from your entire upbringing and your story. I think that's very, very understandable. What does life look like for you these days? Can I say something? And I feel comfortable in this arena with soberly speaking. Do you feel bored? Because you've had such a life full of extreme highs and extreme lows. And now, you're off to work after this interview and we're having a sober conversation. Do you feel bored?
100%. 100%. I get the itch every few months, and I just especially when I forget who I am, if that makes sense, because I live such a mundane, boring, do nothing with my time outside of work life, and I'm like, I could just easily slip back and be this, at the time, think I'm this big alpha, big dog, selling drugs, it really fed my ego, especially being a female in that world. I thought I was killing it.
Yeah.
It was not good and not healthy, but I did have a lot of fun at some points.
What keeps you sober?
I just know, as I said before, I know for a fact that if I was not sober, I would be institutionalized. I would be insane. My brain could not handle any more of what it had already gone through. And obviously in that lifestyle, it's very hard to separate that from traumatic experiences. There's always going to be some sort of, somebody gets shot. So do you know what I mean? The shit that you see, it's just adding to that trauma, and the poor little brain, it can't handle. There's a certain extent that it can handle, and then it's just, I've seen it happen so many times. I did have a little stint in the psych ward, and just watching around me, everybody was in a drug psychosis and never came out of it. I'm like, fuck, that could be me, at any moment. I needed that wake-up call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with our personalities, we will never be able to moderate. We know that that's the path. So I can imagine that is, enough to scare us on the straight and narrow. The glamorizing of the sex industry and, like you just said, seeing girls on TikTok, what are your thoughts?
You see girls on TikTok that you can tell they know what the fuck they're doing, but I don't think they realise how much of an effect they're having on this younger generation, because then a couple videos down, you see an 18-year-old girl who's just started working at a brothel. And I commented on one girl's video being like, I hope that you have people around you to keep you safe, because the industry does not give a fuck about you. They don't. They'll replace you in 4 seconds, babe. They don't care. And this guy came on and attacked me. He's like, what kind of fucking advice is that? I was like, she's already made her choice that she wants to be in the industry. That's on her. I was like, I just hope that she has people, because 99% of the time, young girls, especially that young, they are estranged from their family already for whatever reason. Do you know what I mean? And so they think that that's their family. It's not. It's just the harsh reality is you could form a bond. I formed a bond with a couple girls in a brothel in Sydney, but within a week something's happened and you never see one of them again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's no tight knit anything. And then obviously you see some girls that live this amazing glamorous lifestyle, and I'm like, but it's taken them 10 years to get there. That's not just
mental
them
health.
And you see in some of their videos the days when they're having bad days and good days and stuff. I just feel like girls need the nitty gritty of it, not the, me before, I hung out with a guy for 4 hours and got paid $2,500 for not even sleeping with him. But that is a very, very small percentage. There's other times where you got to, for 2 hours straight, you're stuck in a room with a man that fucking hates you. Yeah. And you're like, fuck, what do I've had, 2 separate guys pull guns on me, steal my money, the whole shebang. It's scary how much it's normalised.
The girl who was doing the housewife diet, as you called it, trying to flee abusive relationship, what advice would you have for her?
Don't wait until you hate them or yourself to leave. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of advice out there saying, no, if you have to wait to leave until you hate them, that's fine. It's not fine, because in the process you hate yourself just as much for staying. And the fucking aftermath of what you have to pick up, I still haven't picked it all up. I left him nearly 7 years ago and I'm still fucked from it. Well, not super fucked, but a little bit fucked. And even if you don't have a network, I didn't have a network. I didn't have somebody to call and tell. I didn't have anybody to tell that I wanted to leave. There's so much more out there now that there will be somebody willing to help. Always. But you just feel so isolated and so alone. And it's hard to get out of that headspace. But there will always be some sort of agency or service or whatever, or even somebody that you work with, a lot of the time if you're honest with somebody, they will go out of their way to help you get out of these situations.
We're going to start wrapping up. What in your future are you excited for now that you are sober?
It's tricky because I never expected to make it past like 18. I was like, I'm going to die every single year. All my family were like, I don't even know how you made it past 21. Do you know what I mean? So it's having that forward thinking is difficult. I wish I had an answer for you. I do. I'm just so along for the ride. Like, I think that's because that's what it's been my whole life. So I'm just kind of like, let's see how it unfolds sober rather than around all these terrible people and terrible things. And
that's so exciting. And your self-worth must have just risen so much these past 3 years. I can only imagine the work that you've done.
Yes.
And I want to thank you so much because even when I first started writing to you, you have been so open and honest from the jump. Nothing was off limits. You've come and sat here and probably broken a few code of conducts, but
she'll be fine.
I will be fine. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having